I wasn't shy about my love for Series 3, but that doesn't mean it's safe from the obligatory ranking video. There's a lot of good stuff here, but some stories are clearly stronger than others, and anyway, it's not like I needed an excuse to talk more about these episodes. Also, you don't need to worry. Before deciding on this ranking video, I did make sure to apply an honesty patch, so you know I'm telling the truth. Let's get into it. Daleks in Manhattan, Evolution of the Daleks, is a mess. But it's a very lovable mess. It's brash, silly, and all those other things, but it's never boring. Like I said in the retrospective video, I appreciate how the episode chooses to depict the Daleks questioning themselves and their species. Why do the Daleks always lose? Should they evolve in order to survive, or would it be better to retain their purity and risk extinction? These are really interesting questions, reminiscent of those explored in Evil of the Daleks from 1967. Speaking of the 60s, so much of this story feels inspired by that era, especially the Hartnell years. The scenes in the sewer feel like classic Doctor Who territory as well, with the Daleks roaming underground and casting their long, iconic shadows up the walls. Sometimes the classic show devolved into a bit of a pantomime, and that's okay. I think the biggest flaw in the episode is its failure to pick a side. It's half pulpy 60s throwback, but it also tries to be a revival era blockbuster, and these two elements cancel each other out. The retro elements feel too silly whenever the story tries to pivot towards a more serious tone, and these serious scenes don't carry the weight of earlier revival stories as a result. I understand why this is. After the three preceding Dalek stories, Daleks in Manhattan could never be a complete pantomime, but given the end result, I think it was a missed opportunity. As much as I love a serious, high-stakes Dalek story, I'm also aware of their inherent silliness. Daleks in Manhattan and Evolution of the Daleks are a pair of unsatisfying episodes, but they still contain enough to enjoy as long as you don't think about it too deeply. My Angel Put the Devil in Me is also a banger, and Tallulah is definitely a guilty pleasure. What do you mean, creatures? Okay, so let's address the elephant in the room, or rather the giant scorpion creature in the room. This looks bad, but so much of the commentary about this story seems to focus on the creature effect, and while I agree that they haven't aged very well, the bad CGI really doesn't bother me that much. It's a shame because I think there's a lot to like about this story. The Jones family is so well written, the divorced parents, the different siblings, the gossiping, it's perfect, and it's entertaining to place the Doctor in the middle of this, especially when Mrs. Jones is so hostile towards him. Martha and Tish have a great sibling relationship, Leo is the perfect older brother character, the Doctor's awkwardness is fun to cringe at, and it's satisfying to see the seeds of the Jones plan being planted by the Saxon agent at the reception. I also think Mark Gatiss is a great choice for Lazarus. He makes him into a perfectly smug Doctor Who antagonist, the kind who thinks they can triumph over time or science, only to have it all blow up in their face. Tennant had also really mastered his brooding by Series 3, and his final conversation with Lazarus about aging and death is really well done. I love the way the camera moves around them, and the choice to set it in a cathedral makes it even more dramatic. I think there's more to enjoy in the Dalek two-parter, but the Lazarus experiment is the more tonally consistent story for me, which is why I placed it slightly higher. I wanted to split the finale up into its 3 separate episodes for this ranking, something that I haven't done for previous examples in Series 1 and 2. In this case, the difference in quality between each of these episodes was big enough that I felt like I couldn't rank them all together, and I wanted to give each episode the credit it deserved. It also helps that each episode takes place in its own distinct time period. There are large gaps between each instalment, large enough to judge them as 3 individual stories. Last of the Time Lords is commonly viewed as a disappointment, but I think it's actually quite good up until the final confrontation. The bleakness of the setting is intoxicating right from that first warning about planet Earth being closed. There have been a lot of bombastic finales in the show, but I think this one feels particularly scary because you actually see the effect of the Master's victory. So many finales revolve around averting a threat, which is fine, but it can be hard to conceptualize, say, the end of the universe or the end of time. But here it's the smaller details that resonate with me, seeing the people packed into houses, seeing Lucy clearly having been abused by the Master throughout the year, even Professor Doherty's beat up black and white television. It gives a glimpse of people's individual experiences in this world, which makes it feel all the more real. Okay, and now for the negatives. Starting with the Doctor, I think the CGI Tennant was a mistake, but I think it's flawed in concept as well as execution. I don't really feel anything watching him age, as much as the music and editing tries to persuade me otherwise. It feels a bit too silly to be shocking, but I am aware that they couldn't really have the Master torture him any other way. Then there's the resolution. The use of the telepathic network to amplify people's prayers is very unsatisfying, the kind of conclusion that makes you go, well, yeah, I guess that works. I don't have as much of a problem with erasing the previous year at the end. Keeping this nightmare world intact would have been interesting, and I would have admired the gall to even attempt it, but the show was obviously going to return to the status quo. That's not inherently bad, and the main characters at least retain their memories of that year, but it's hard not to see it as a massive rewind button that magically fixes everything. People have criticised Davies' reliance on Deus Ex Machina, and I think there are few examples worse than this one. It would be a disappointing end to this one episode, but it's even cheaper as a conclusion to 2.5 episodes worth of build-up. The main cast are great, Tennant's emotional scene with the Master at the end is really affecting, and the burning of the body is beautifully shot, but it's hard to enjoy these moments fully in light of what comes before them. The Shakespeare Code is so much fun. Like, so much fun. I think the dialogue is the key here. It's witty enough to make this obvious idea feel fresh and exciting. A Shakespeare episode is a no-brainer for the show, and a sci-fi take on witches makes sense for this setup. But the execution is so good that the episode transcends the novelty of its premise and feels like an essential episode rather than a story dependent on charm alone. I think it was a good decision to make Shakespeare more important to the overall story here. Although I like the characterisation of Charles Dickens as more of a bystander to the events of The Unquiet Dead, the decision to make this story revolve around Shakespeare rather than simply feature him results in a more focused episode. The plot ties into his personal life and his work in a way that makes his historical relevance more important. He becomes a satisfying character rather than simply a walking reference book or source of comic relief. Ultimately, the Shakespeare Code is a superlative example of a certain type of Doctor Who story. It features the TARDIS team meeting a famous author, sure, but more broadly it's a fast-paced romp through a gorgeous historical setting. It's a formula that the show has used before and would use again and again, but the results were rarely as good as they are here. It might not stand out as much on first viewing, but the more I watch Smith & Jones, the more I'm convinced that it's one of the best series openers the show has ever produced. It's like a machine, introducing a new companion, setting up the new status quo, and showcasing a new alien species like it's nothing. The fact that it's also a great episode in its own right is really quite impressive. Martha is wonderful throughout Series 3, but she's worth praising here for the incredibly strong impression she makes right out of the gate. I'm sold in the first 10 minutes. From her family to her job, everything about her feels so real. The Doctor also feels like he's been given a shot in the arm, and the chemistry between the two leads is as instant as it is palpable. If you were being critical, I suppose the plot isn't the most exciting. The premise exists mainly as a way to introduce our new companion, with an obligatory alien species that border on being simply monsters of the week. But the Judoon are such incredible creatures that I think they succeed on sheer spectacle alone. Their design and execution are flawless. It's no wonder they became as iconic as they did. The Plasmavore is less visually interesting, but I still think she makes for an unnerving villain, and Anne Reid gives a suitably menacing performance. Smith & Jones isn't flashy or groundbreaking. Its appeal is simple, but a simple idea can lead to extraordinary results when demonstrated effectively, and that's exactly what this episode does. It might rely on well-worn tropes and ideas, but everything is executed so well that it still feels fresh and invigorating. Running down corridors has never been so enjoyable. I suppose I should get this out the way. I think Blink is incredible. It really is a perfect piece of television, just 45 minutes of pure gold that I would struggle to find a fault with. It's incredibly clever, and I marvel at the inventiveness of the script every time I watch it. It uses the limitation of being a Dr. Light episode to create something completely original, but I think that limitation is still felt in the Doctor and Martha's absence. Sally Sparrow is a great protagonist, and Moffat creates an interesting sidecast to support her, but Blink lacks the character moments that make the rest of Series 3 so enjoyable to watch. It's still a great episode though, don't get me wrong. I love a story that really uses time travel beyond simply going to the future or the past. The way in which the Doctor's DVD message is used in separate conversations but still fits them both is really clever writing, and the mystery of these random Easter eggs is well paced for a first-time viewer. Moffat really is one of the best writers to ever work on Doctor Who, and the quality of this episode is a testament to his talent. If you needed to have a Dr. Light episode in a series, then I'd much rather have something interesting than a story that feels like blatant filler. For all the camp, ironic appeal of Love and Monsters, it's still an episode with a lot of problems, something that Blink doesn't struggle with. It's a story designed to serve a specific function, which it performs with exceptional flair. It might not contain the character interactions that distinguish my favourite episodes of the series, but I won't try and argue that this makes it a bad episode, even without many of the show's defining traits. It's Blink. Come on now. It's obviously a bit hard to judge Utopia on its own, but I couldn't lump it in with Last of the Time Lords given the disparity in quality between the two episodes. It's one of the most exhilarating stories in the show's history, with a truly breakneck pace and enough quality character interactions to feel fulfilling as a standalone episode. Even without the knowledge that something big is coming, the bleakness of the setting is potent enough to sustain the atmosphere of the story. The idea of the end of the universe is quite vague, and something that the show often uses to bolster the threat of a villain, but Utopia manages to make this idea feel completely believable. Seeing the last remaining humans struggling to outlive the oncoming darkness is so affecting, and it only gets more chilling the more you think about it. The threat isn't particularly evocative, but it's horrifying in its own mundane way. There's no blood, no conflict, just nothing. The end. The insurmountable nature of the issue is part of what makes Professor Yana such a likeable character. To see him and Chantho continue to work despite their inability to solve the problem is heartwarming. I also love the decision to bring Jack back for this adventure, given his great chemistry with both the 10th Doctor and Martha. The conversation he has with the Doctor while he's fixing the ship's couplings is a particular highlight. Hearing Tennant be so matter-of-fact about abandoning Jack is another great example of his occasional coldness, and Jack's response to the question of his own death adds a small layer of vulnerability to this comically overconfident character. Utopia is more than its final 10 minutes, but that closing sequence is what really makes the episode stand out. Tennant's absolute terror at the realisation of who Yana could be is exhilarating to watch, and Derek Jacobi absolutely kills it as the Master, if only for a few minutes. The ending is one of the best cliffhangers in the entire show, but the identity of the villain is only a small part of that. It would feel cheap without all of the groundwork, but thankfully the episode is worthy of such high stakes. Utopia would be fine as a standalone story, but the tension it wrings from that final reveal turns it into something much greater. It's also probably the quickest 45 minutes of my life. Okay, so everything I just said about Utopia in relation to the finale goes double for The Sound of Drums. I just couldn't rank these 3 episodes as one when the middle part is as good as this. Honestly, I think it's the biggest disappointment about Last of the Time Lords that it fumbles maybe the greatest setup of any series finale. Maybe. What makes this episode so special is the level to which the Doctor, Martha and Jack are outmatched right from the start. They're constantly on the back foot, and the episode ends with them outright losing to the Master despite their best efforts. It helps that the threat is more grounded than, say, an alien invasion, and feels much more real as a result. The whole sequence of Martha's family being arrested is absolutely incredible. Seeing Martha realise what's happening as the music kicks in is so exhilarating, as is watching the trio drive away from gunfire and end up on the run. The three of them are alone, fighting a threat that no one can see, with the full force of the government bearing down on them. I think it's the first time that the Doctor seems genuinely unsafe in modern-day Earth. He's not given up, but his sheen of confidence has clearly been punctured, and it makes for compelling results. I suppose this is a good time to finally talk about John Simm's Master. I can see why someone might dislike his portrayal given how over the top he can be, but I am not one of those people. I think the best Master portrayals are those that respond to the Doctor they're paired against, and Sim succeeds in doing just that. Tennant's Doctor is fun, but he's also cocky, slightly self-important, and occasionally mournful. It's compelling seeing someone so confident face a villain who poses a genuine threat and exhibits comparative intelligence and ability. Likewise, Tennant's heartfelt pleas to the Master and his appeals to their shared tragic history are met with gleeful dismissal from a man revelling in his own villainy. It's obviously a matter of personal taste, but I enjoy his antics for the most part. I wouldn't want Doctor Who to be serious all the time, and I enjoy the odd cheesy line or moment. I love it when he gives his election broadcast and suggests that the country needs a doctor. I like the scene in the cabinet room too. I think it's funny and menacing, but I'm aware that the Master doing his silly faces is what people remember most about it. The theatrical moments don't all land. I think his delivery to Martha as he reveals her family is particularly grating, but any feelings I have about it are instantly overshadowed by the shocking image of Francine crying with a gun pointed at her head. I think that's what makes this Master work for me. No matter how silly he gets, I always buy the threat he poses, and his visible competence can help justify the occasional lapses into pantomime territory. That voodoo child needle drop, on the other hand, no justification needed. I'm often not sure about general fan consensus when it comes to most Doctor Who episodes, so if my perception of Gridlock is inaccurate, then don't take it too seriously. But I feel like this episode isn't talked about as much as some others, and if that's the case, then it's a real shame. Gridlock is fantastic from start to finish, a real hidden gem from the Davies era, if such a thing exists, and a story that would probably be the standout in almost any other series. In the retrospective video, I said that Gridlock wasn't a political story, which I maybe could have explained a bit more. Gridlock obviously has political undertones, but they are firmly in the background. There's not enough time to properly explore the culture of the Undercity or the issues relating to and from the drug epidemic, and so I don't think the story is ever making an incisive point about the issues it raises. But this isn't a criticism, it's merely an observation. I don't need every story to have a concrete argument, and Gridlock instead incorporates its various themes to create a truly intoxicating setting. Pharmacy Town feels like a living, breathing place, quite the accomplishment for such a small set, and the multitude of different cars brilliantly highlights the vibrancy of New Earth and its various cultures. Culture is the key word here. Gridlock is a story about resilience, about the things that we as a society hold on to when faced with difficult times, and the mythologizing that helps sustain this resilience when all else fails. It's genuinely heartwarming. I think Gridlock is one of the most charming and endearing stories in the show's history. The setting is great thanks to excellent world building and exceptional set design, but this bleak dystopian nightmare eventually gives way to some truly uplifting moments. That phenomenal closing scene between Martha and the Doctor is just the icing on the cake. Okay, question time. How many of you clicked on this video and expected Human Nature and the Family of Blood to be the #1 pick? It's funny, I feel like Blink is the only other episode that rivals this one in terms of widespread appreciation, and yet both these stories revolve around the absence of the Doctor. I suppose the Doctor's absence isn't quite as egregious here. For one thing, we at least get Martha in a prominent role. She's really the main protagonist, having to deal with the Family of Blood almost single-handedly alongside the racist attitudes of several other characters. It's also a two-parter, meaning that we get twice as long with John Smith as we do with, say, Sally Sparrow. But the biggest reason that Human Nature works is the absolute believability of the John Smith character. He's not the Doctor, but he's likeable in a different way. He's not as confident, but still ultimately as brave. As Joan reminds the Doctor, John Smith chose to die in the end. The romance between Joan Redfern and John Smith is a large part of why the character works so well. The relationship is believable, you want them both to be happy with each other even though you know they never will be. The dream of a normal death sequence is absolutely heartbreaking. It's a testament to Tennant's performance here that you could almost believe him when he pretends to give up the fob watch to the family. The Doctor does, of course, return, and although the initial reveal inspires pure elation, the following scenes explore some of the darkest aspects of the character. His punishments for the family are so chilling, especially when paired with Tennant's glowering expression, while his final conversation with Joan exposes a selfishness that is rarely examined in the show. The threat of the family of blood is largely bolstered by the emotional stakes that they force onto the protagonists. John Smith has to sacrifice his love and essentially kill himself to defeat the villains. But the villains are also threatening in their design and presentation. Harry Lloyd is particularly menacing as Bane's later son of mine, and the Scarecrows are a suitably creepy secondary monster. The direction helps here too. The scene of the Scarecrows being assembled and the way it cuts between their arms or heads is so visually impactful, and it heightens the tension of their attack. Placing the children's rendition of To Be a Pilgrim over the battle scene is another great touch. There are so many moments like this that I could talk about, small additions that help make this already great story into something truly special. I could do an entire video on this one story and still miss things out. It's the obvious choice, but the acclaim of human nature in the family of blood is well deserved. Everything about this two-parter is exceptional, from the script to the performances to the direction, making it my pick for the best story of Series 3. Thanks for watching this ranking video. As always, I'd be interested to hear your opinions, whether or not you agree with my list and what you would place as the best or worst of the series. Looking at my list, I think the jump in quality between Last of the Time Lords and the Shakespeare Code is massive, and I wouldn't hesitate to call every episode from number 7 onwards genuinely great. Series 4 is up next, so stay tuned for the upcoming retrospective, but until then, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.